So hello guys and welcome back to the channel. Something a little bit different this week for two main reasons. The mainest of those reasons, that's definitely not a word, but I'm going to leave it in there, is I've had a little bit of an infection on my face. Well, it was actually in my mouth and the infection spread onto my face, so my head looks like a pufferfish, or yeah, it actually doesn't look too bad now. I've been on antibiotics to get rid of the infection, but yeah, I guess I'm like 4 days into that course of antibiotics, and I just didn't really feel comfortable going out and doing, like, you know, an on-location video when I'm not feeling 100%. And secondly, and probably more in line with everything that goes on with this channel, I get a lot of questions about how I edit my Woodland photographs, so it's an absolute delight to be able to, I guess, have the opportunity to make this video. Or I guess I'm turning a negative into a positive. Loads of you want to know my editing workflow for my Woodland photographs, specifically, and, you know, not just my normal landscape vistas on the side of a mountain in the Lake District or something like that. So yeah, it's a really good opportunity for me to do this. Just a quick couple of disclaimers really. Firstly, this is my workflow. You know, I'm not saying this is the right way to edit your photographs. I'm not saying it's the quickest way. I'm definitely not saying it's the easiest way as well. I'm very much self-taught with my post-processing, so there's probably easier ways to do things that I'm going to show you, but this is everything what works for me, and if I can teach you one or two things along the way, then that'll be absolutely mint. So secondly, you can see this is the photograph we're going to be working with today. Obviously I did a lot of work out on location to capture this photograph. It should go without saying, you know. I haven't just taken a photograph of a woodland scene and then I'm going to post-process it. So if you'd like to see how I actually took this photograph out on location in a lot more detail, why I took it, what settings I used, how I composed it, I'll put a link to that on location video up in the corner. But anyway, let's begin. To put it basically in terms of the composition, I'll sort of re-explain it. A lot of you will have seen that video, but it was all about this light, this beautiful glow we've got kind of in the center and to the left of this image. And that's what first attracted me to this scene. So it was the light that came first, and second was the composition. And a couple of things that are really important with this composition. This oak tree, I've centralized it to give it a lot of prominence. And then we've got a nice left-right balance between these yew trees here and the little limestone cliffs and this yew tree, and this tree is really important as well. So that's a nice left-right balance, but then these two trees are leaning from right to left, so they're kind of encouraging the eye to sort of you know, move towards this area of glow and nice light here, which is just absolutely fantastic. So for most of my editing, I usually start in Lightroom, whereas my woodland images, when I'm editing and post-processing, I usually start in Photoshop, so it's a bit strange really. I guess it will become obvious as to why that is. So let's start. You can see I've got the one layer down here. First thing I'm going to do is create two extra layers. So on a Mac, I'm going to click Command and J. I'm going to click back on layer 0, which is my, let's call it the base layer, and I'm going to click Command and J once more. I wouldn't usually name the layers, but I'm going to do it for the sake of this video. This one is going to be called Dodge and Burn, and this one I am going to call Orton, and a lot of you will know what that is. Whoa! A lot of you will know what that is. But if you don't, stick around. It's a really cool, like, woodland editing technique. So let's begin with the Dodge and Burn layer. I'm going to bring it to the top so we can see it. And basically all I want to do here is, you see these trees here, I want to affect the shadows and the highlights, and that's basically what dodging and burning is. You can see we've got some nice subtle highlights of that light capturing this tree on the right hand side. This light is kind of coming from the top right hand side of this image, coming through a canopy in the forest. All I want to do here with regards to dodging and burning, and what dodging and burn is to increase the exposure of the highlights and decrease the exposure of the shadows, and it's kind of just increasing contrast locally. And it's something that I only really do with my woodland images. I never really do this in any other niche of landscape photography. So I'm going to start with the dodge, which is for the highlights. I always remember burn is shadows, because like if you burn a piece of wood, it goes black. So that's how my mind works there for you guys. And then I've got up here, I've got highlights selected, because that's what I want to affect. And then I'm going to have it on 15%, but you might want to play around with it a bit. And it's all about just increasing the subtlety of this sort of area of highlights on the right hand side of this tree, but not overdoing it. So I'm going to increase the size of the brush slightly. I'm going to start up here, I'm going to hold shift, I'm going to move to the bottom, and see how it just draws a line, or you could just brush in like that if you want, but I quite like this technique. And just twice like that, that's going to do me. Honestly, I don't want to overdo it. And you can see it just kind of increases the exposure of them highlights there on the right hand side of the tree. I'm going to do the same for this yew tree, but I'm going to decrease the size of the brush slightly. And you can just see, it's really subtle. See here, you've got shadows there, highlights there. Because we've only got highlights selected, it's not going to, you know, brighten the shadows, but you do still need to be careful. I'm going to do the same thing, hold shift, it's just going to draw that line. And you can see it's here as well, just on the right hand side of this yew tree. That'll do. And I will probably, big brush, just do that, something like that. Yeah, there we go, that'll do. Now I'm going on to the burn. Click on burn, and I've got it on 3% here. And this is all about decreasing the exposure of the shadows. So on the left hand side of this tree, I'm going to decrease the exposure of the shadows. Something like that. And I definitely don't want to overdo it. I might actually brush in a little bit here. And then I'm going to do around the base of this tree as well. Straight out the top drawer. And then same again, so it's quite simple. It's like you're almost creating an illusion of the light coming in from the right hand side. It's not an illusion, because that's what the light's doing anyway. We're just accentuating it, you know, with the dodge and burn effect, which is beautiful. So you can do it as much or as little as you want. It's all down to personal preference, and that will probably do it for me. I don't want to overdo it. I might just add a little bit more darkness to this area here, and then maybe some of these sort of limestone boulders down here, but that'll do it. So I always like to do a quick before and after, just to see, and you can see there, that's it's felt like we've done it's felt like we've been quite subtle as we've been making that edit, but when you do the before and after, you can see it's quite a nice change. And I think these two trees now look a lot more natural in many ways, and they definitely sort of like the light marries quite well with what's going on over this side of the image, where, you know, the light's coming in from the right hand side, but you're getting shadows on the left hand side of things. Yeah, and I think that looks cool. So that's the dodging and burning done. So I'm going to move this one to the top, the Orton effect. And yeah, a lot of you will know what this is. And to put it simply, it's basically deliberately adding a blur to your whole photograph. A very, very subtle blur. Obviously you're not blurring it so much that it looks like you haven't got your glasses on. But what it basically does is adds a little bit of a magical, ethereal, and a bit of a fairy tale feel to your photograph, and I think it works particularly well with woodland images. A lot of you, like I've said, will already know about this technique. I would say I use it on the vast majority of my woodland shots. Even if I don't use it, I still, you know, go through this process in Photoshop and trial it. So I'll show you how I do it now. Filter, obviously, sorry, I make sure I have this layer selected. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur, perhaps it's Gaussian, I don't know. With regards to pixels, it doesn't really matter that much, as long as it just, in this square here, obviously if you have it on that, it's not really got any blur at all. If it's that, oh Jesus, it doesn't even come up. What's going on? Yeah, like that is mental like. But I usually aim for whatever megapixels my camera is. So Nikon D70-200, 24 megapixels, and that does it for me. So I'm going to click on OK there, let that load up. And obviously you can see there, that just looks silly. So I'm going to make it look even more silly. Image, and this is all still on the same layer by the way. Image, adjustments and levels, and you get this little sort of histogram looking thing up here. If you pull this side of the histogram up, it decreases them shadows and it looks disgusting. If you pull this side of the histogram back down, it increases the highlights and it looks even more disgusting. Click OK, and that, guys, is my completed Woodland edit. No, it isn't. That looks disgusting. So you're probably thinking, if you don't know anything about the Orton effect, what is going on here? Look at the state of that. Now here's the final part of this technique, is opacity. So again, make sure you've got this layer selected here, and then the opacity is only going to affect this layer. Obviously if it's on 100%, it's completely opaque, it's showing that layer in its full form. If you've got it on 0, it's completely transparent, so it's like we've never done anything. So our goal is just to try and pick the correct percentage. I usually aim for like somewhere between 7 and 15%, something like that. It's very much dependent on each photograph, it's individual. Here I might try 9, and again, same as the dodge and burn, just do a quick before and after with this little sort of box here. I think that looks so much better. See, keep your eyes on these leaves here, this little section. Watch how it just adds a lovely little magical glow. Absolutely beautiful. I'm going to bring it down to 8%. I think that's a little bit much. Yeah, absolutely awesome. So that, guys, the only other thing that I would do in Woodland, I'm not going to do it on this particular image, in Photoshop, is I'd sometimes use this tool here, the clone stamp tool, and that's basically getting rid of like twigs and stuff in the foreground if it looked a little bit messy. But I don't really mind it on here, on this particular photograph. So as far as Photoshop is concerned, that is this image complete. So I'm now going to open it up in Lightroom. So there we go, we've got it open in Lightroom, and I'm sure you'll agree it doesn't look too bad already. Now, just briefly, guys, before I get into my Lightroom edits here, I wanted to let you know that my 2021 calendar is now available to pre-order. I know it's like proper early. Who buys a calendar in July? But I just wanted to give you a lot of time. With regards to pre-orders, I'm gonna honour like free international shipping. Prices have gone up a little bit since the pandemic and that, but yeah, I did it last year, so I'm gonna honour it. Super proud of it. Can't wait to get my first batch. And I'll put a link below and probably one up in the corner as well if you want to purchase that. It's going to be a mint product. Really love the company that I work with that make these calendars. They look absolutely beautiful, and if you like as well, you know, obviously it's a great way to support what I do here on YouTube and stuff like that. So thanks very much for that. Now back to this image. So yeah, now is just a case of my standard Lightroom edits really, so it becomes a little bit more normal in terms of, you know, this is how I'd be editing landscape photographs anyway. So the first thing that I would do is scroll down, forget about the basic edits, and remove chromatic aberration. I just do that for absolutely every image that comes into Lightroom, no matter what. Enable profile corrections. I don't really do that often. A lot of people do. It doesn't really bother me. So I'm basically just going to go in this basic section here, and I guess work from top to bottom. A lot of things I'm not even going to touch because I don't really need to. Temperature, I might increase it a tiny bit. It's looking a little bit kind of blue. I like to, I guess, let's say accentuate that kind of golden glow of the light rather than it being a little bit more of a blue toned glow. So 5's a bit much, I might go on 4. So again, it's all very subtle edits. Woodland photography is all subtle edits that come together to make one, you know, pleasing final edit. So as you're editing, you might think, oh, this isn't really making a big difference, but trust me, by the end of it, it does. One thing I'd like to do is maybe increase the contrast ever so slightly. I just want to be really subtle here, especially with regards to the global edits and things like that. Global edits are when you make an edit, it edits the whole photograph, Whereas these tools up here, or most of these tools, give you the opportunity to make what's known as a local edit. So say for example, I only wanted to add contrast to this tree or to this section of the image. That will be a local edit because I'm locally selecting an area in the photograph. So that's why I like to be subtle with my global edits, because it's affecting absolutely everything. I might bring the shadows down a little bit. A lot of you guys know how much I love my dark shadows. And I'll reiterate, I think I said this at the start, but a lot of what this image is about is this huge area of light here, this glow. There's two really good ways you can increase, you can accentuate this glow, is either by increasing your highlights, which I don't want to do, it's already quite bright, or by decreasing your shadows, which I guess, you know, adds in a little bit of contrast. So again, I don't want to do it too much because I'll probably make some local edits in a minute. And then I might get onto the local edits now. I might increase the vibrance ever so slightly. This is something that I definitely don't want to overdo in the woodland, especially in, like, you know, spring and summer. So that would be a really important bit of advice for you, actually. You know, really be careful with your vibrance and saturation. Like, look at the state of that. If you increase the saturation, you need to be careful. If anything, sometimes you might want to look at decreasing the vibrance and saturation. I prefer to use vibrance because I feel like it targets a lot less of the colours in any given photograph. I do want to add a little bit in this case. Let's say 7. So a quick before and after there. Look, that's quite a nice difference from what it was when it first came into Lightroom. We've got a nice bit, a bit more of a golden glow coming in, especially if you look around here. And a little bit more vibrance on them leaves, which I actually really like. I'm going to go down, add a little bit of a vignette, very subtle. Oh, I like that. Bit of a before and after. Top draw. Now I'm going to do, I'm almost finished now, to be honest, guys, but I'm going to do a couple of local edits. I guess I'm going to, I want to darken the shadows a little bit more. So I'm clicking on this brush tool here, or you can click K on the keyboard, whichever you so prefer. And then, yeah, click on Effect up here and Burn, Darken, which is basically just going to decrease the exposure by what, almost 1/3 of a stop. And you've got your brush in here, so anywhere you paint in now, it's going to darken a little bit. So I want this darkened, because it's already an area that's quite dark. See here, I'll zoom in a little bit here. This area is really subtle, but you can see how this bit here, it's like almost a triangular shape, is quite dark, whereas this is all highlights. So I just kind of want to darken this area a little bit. See how subtle that is. But again, that's helping us to accentuate these highlighted areas, which is just brilliant. Let's get this back to normal, maybe around here a little bit as well, just to encourage the eye to be drawn, excuse me, to be drawn to this area of light. Done. So yeah, what I was saying before about how I love my shadows, I do get a lot of people commenting saying like, oh, your shadows are too dark, which is fair enough, you know, it's all subjective, and that's just something you have to decide in yourself. This area here is so dark, these trees are dark, this yew tree is dark, you might want them a bit brighter, that's perfectly fine. It's a decision that you ought to make by yourself. You know, if the best thing about these sorts of videos when you watch them, because I'm the same when I watch editing videos on YouTube, is you can just, you know, hand pick certain tips, certain things that you like from it, and you can discard certain bits from it that might not suit your style, and that's something that's absolutely fantastic. Excuse me. So one last thing that I want to do is another little darken or burn. Earlier on when we were in Photoshop, I was mentioning the composition and how these trees were kind of leaning from right to left and encouraging the eye into this light. So I actually find this area a little bit distracting. It's a bit pointless, you know, this area of forest or foliage. So I'm just going to darken it ever so slightly. If you want to, you can press O on your keyboard and it'll bring up the mask. So anything that's red, whoops, sorry, I'm going to zoom into that area. Anything that's red is what's going to be darkened, what's going to be affected by this edit. You don't have to be too specific because we are being proper subtle, but if you want to, you can hold Option on the keyboard and you can delete the mask in certain areas. So obviously I don't want it to affect that tree. So something like that. I'm going to press O again to get rid of the mask and zoom out. And you can see here, obviously if I went like that, it looks absolutely ridiculous. But it's really subtle. I just want to darken it down a bit. I might bring the whites down a bit. There's quite a lot of whites you can see there. Might bring that down a fair bit actually. So something like that. And yeah, that's the final edit, guys. That's it. So that's a before and after since we've got it into Lightroom. That's obviously not a before and after from the raw file, but I'll show to you now that very before and after. I'll show you the raw file, and then I'll try and somehow like kind of in a really cool way sort of merge it into the final edit, you know. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope that you've got something from this video. I hope to see you out on location again soon. Give the video a like if you have a quick second. That always helps me out. And please comment below. And remember, if you'd like to pre-order one of my 2021 calendars, the link will be underneath this video in the description. Thank you so much, and I hope you like this final edit.